Okay, I'm going to give it another try. I actually had so many misspellings. We'll see if I have too many on this one. Um, so this is a video. It's really a culmination of several key ideas, and I'm trying to put them all together because I think it's so important. I don't know if I'm going to publish this one, but this one gets into. Let me actually just say that if somebody was watching this, there's bhakti love, bhakti yoga, becoming one with consciousness through just pure love and love, caringness, serving others. And I love that. This ultimately really is combining the bhakti love and meditation and caring for others with jnana yoga, which is the path of knowledge. And I use both. I think anybody probably is using a combination of these. But in the end of the second half of this video, I'm going to bring something up that I haven't brought up. And it really gets into what's called cosmology, which is the nature of the world and the universe, how the mind's put together. And boy, this just popped up this morning, and I couldn't figure out how to communicate these concepts from Shankara, the great Swami, without these other first two. So this is just great stuff. So let's just see what happens here as we move along. The first one, whoops, that's not right. There we go. The first just gets into meditation. And in this, it's another book. I forgot that this was actually the first book I read. And I wanted to learn about meditation when I went to the temple of Vedanta Hinduism. And Swami Vivekananda has this book, Meditation and Its Methods, and it's really just excerpts. And I was stunned when I read this. I forgot all about it until just now. And I always thought meditation was how to relax or how to have peace. And I shouldn't say that as if it was a negative to say that. That's what I thought. But Swami Vivekananda brings up a whole different viewpoint, and it's right off on page 1. And he talks about basically controlling or focusing the mind. And he mentions a calm lake as an analogy. And he says, how is this attained? In a dozen different ways. Each temperament has its own way. But this is the general principle of meditation. Get hold of the mind. I remember when I read that, I thought there was a whole different purpose. So this was page 1. And I think it's very important, and I've said this a million times on these videos, that there are many paths to consciousness, to God. The idea that there's only one method is an absurdity. And here again, it has to fit your temperament. But what a fascinating statement. I've always remembered this. Page 1, the first book, Get a Hold of the Mind. And he tells a little story. He talks about you sit down to meditate, and then the second part of this quote, just this moment I think I'm all right, and I'll meditate on God. And then my mind goes to London in 1 minute. And if I pull it away from there, it goes to New York to think about the things I've done there in the past. These waves are to be stopped by the power of meditation. The great Swami Vivekananda. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. And of course, I read that and I sat down to meditate, and boom, off I'm just thinking about Paris or wherever it is, thinking about my next workout and running or biking or whatever the heck I was going to do. It's amazing to watch the mind at work. I'll add that I think just being able to sit there and be there and watch it and not react to it. Because a little bit after this, he talks about how, or maybe it's the other quotes too, that we're learning to control the mind, but how does that then reflect out into controlling what we're looking at, perceiving the whole universe? So there's a great power and strength gained from meditation. I had never shown this quote and how important it was to me. Just absolutely incredible. So let's take that away and then go into something I've already talked about. So this is then you're controlling the mind or learning to focus and direct the mind. And this is what my other videos on the Buddha's four immeasurables. And I'm just going to review it real quick. All life is interdependent. That's that oneness, the consciousness. Therefore, the happiness of one individual depends upon that of others. The Buddha taught the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, in order to remove ill will, cruelty, jealousy, clinging, and aversion. That clinging and aversion is huge. That's what we crave and what we protest and resist. This is what binds us, or one of the main elements that binds and ties us to the idea of a little s self, to the body. And so what a beautiful thing if we can just learn, and this is where bhakti, love, caringness, loving God, serving others. This is not just in our meditation, in our mind, it's in the real world too. The more we can practice loving kindness, meditate on loving kindness, compassion, joy for others. There was another, I'm not going to bring it up, but it talked about what is love. Love is wanting happiness for others. So the more we meditate on those, the more this other junk leaves. And what happens is we start losing the idea of self, and we start gaining the bigger S self. We start gaining the connection to consciousness and God. Everything starts to change. Now, I've already gone over those, so why is this the next part I haven't gone over? And I just wanted to bring this up because I think this is the area of cosmology and the mind and the universe. And it's so fascinating. I know some friends that will just look at this and go, wow, that is really, really interesting. So this is how Shankara is starting to describe the mind, the universe, how things are put together. And it's again Shankara's crest jewel of discrimination. And I read these, and I remember my jaw dropped a couple, 3 years ago when I read it. And now, for the first time, all of these components that are key in my mind, on my path only, maybe you'll like them, maybe you won't, but I love talking about these things. So here we go. The first one is just the definition of superimposition. So this is a quote, and he says, Shankara tells us that superimposition is the apparent presentation to consciousness by the memory of something previously observed elsewhere. Now, this is my interpretation, but elsewhere he talks about consciousness, he talks about God, he talks about the mind, he talks about there has to be a canvas out there, and that these things are being superimposed, whether it's in the mind, whether it's in the real universe. So that's his word, superimposition, is the apparent presentation to consciousness by the memory of something previously observed elsewhere. I will add in, and this is my interpretation, that if we create something on our own, we have to be putting it out there on the canvas. And then he describes an example. I think it's a cute example. How many people, we've all done this before. We see a snake, we remember it. Next day, we see a coil of rope. We superimpose the remembered snake upon it and thereby misunderstand its nature. So there's what's truth, and then there's superimposition on top of it, and that gets everything going and confused. I'll even add that superimposition, it just keeps going, and we find ourselves repeating and repeating and repeating, and the superimposition just keeps going and going. I don't want to, boy, I could get talking about that forever. But just remember that definition of superimposition. Then we take it one step further. The next page he gets into, and I'm just going to read this quote. The superimposition, this is of the ego idea upon existence Notice the capital E there, upon God, the canvas, consciousness. The superimposition of the ego idea upon existence is our first and most important act as human beings. The moment we have made this central act of superimposition, the moment we have said, I am private, I am separate, I am an individual, we have set upon a chain reaction which makes further superimposition inevitable. I've heard other words for this. I think this is the clearest statement I've ever seen. Now what's interesting, and let me just read this. The claimed individuality for ourselves implies individuality everywhere. Now does that mean there isn't in this world, in this plane, in this lake of wavelengths, that there isn't a Jim or a Lynn or my dog Babu? Yeah, okay, I get it. There's different awarenesses and wavelengths. So let's not get argumentative about these things. This is just a very, very key point here. The claimed individuality for ourselves implies individuality everywhere. It automatically superimposes a multiple world of creatures and objects upon the one, undivided reality, the existence which is Brahman. Brahman is another word for God, consciousness, the all. That's just an incredible statement. Once we've said, I am I, there's the ego idea, everything just starts to go. Fabulous. That's called cosmology, how it all is put together. I'm going to let everybody who looks at this go read Shankara. Lose the ego idea. Here's the next incredible line. Once that is lost in transcendental consciousness and the world appearance, lose the ego idea in transcendental consciousness and the world appearance must necessarily vanish. I think I read, and I think it's, I'm going to go ahead and paraphrase, but I thought I also read in Shankara, I don't have the quote, but as soon as we lose the idea of little s self, which is being superimposed out, the whole universe can disappear. I think that's interesting, and I believe one of the great quotes or that we hear a lot, whether or not it's ever defined, I don't know because I haven't read enough on Lord Buddha, but Buddha talks about he was constantly reminding himself of the concept of no self. I read somewhere where he said that basically was a constant reminder of no ego idea, and well, through loving kindness and all of that, letting go of self and becoming the bigger picture. There it is. There it is. Look at that quote. And let me go to the next one that kind of says it clearer. Next page. Shankara is speaking here of two stages in the process of superimposition. First, the ego idea is superimposed upon the inner self. And I think he says, not literally. First, the ego idea is superimposed upon the inner self, the existence reality. Then the ego idea, searching outward, as it were, identifies itself with the body and the body's mental and physical attributes and actions. And then he kind of goes on, and this is more of a reminder to myself. He says, we say as a matter of course, I am fat, I am walking, I am sitting, and so on and so on. So there's a statement of it. In the next paragraph, he actually says, and then we start reaching out and saying, that is my car, that is my house, that is my friend, that is this, that. Isn't that a fascinating statement? So I wanted to bring all of these up because I think the concept of superimposition is immensely powerful. I don't know, I'm just going to say something that, and I mentioned this before, but about a year or two ago, I realized that if I try to think any of these things, it doesn't work because I'm being the mind. And I don't want to be that. It kind of talks about in what you're really trying to do is maybe focus or direct and manage. You're being senior to the mind. You're being senior to the idea of a body or ego. You're being who you really are. And he even talks about how through the four immeasurables you can arrive there. But now we're starting to see, and Shankara, to me, it's unbelievable how well he defines consciousness, who we really are. He talks about Atman and Brahman, are the words of India. So I hope this wasn't too out there. I love this stuff. I just absolutely love this stuff. But remember, it's all through realization, not through punditry or just knowing the words. But this is our combination of bhakti, love, yoga, bhakti yoga, becoming one with God, finding consciousness on that path, and jnana yoga, which is a path of knowledge. So here's some very strong path of knowledge. And in my mind, all of the paths come together as one existence, self, consciousness anyway. So there you go. Hope you like this one.